close your eyes and envision a place without water. Now envision a place that's abundant with water. What are the kinds of comparisons that you're making in your mind? And it's really the thing that supports life.
It feels good when it's a hot day. It feels good when you drink it. It feels good when you're swimming in Flathead Lake.
As to your spirituality, just to know that we have water. And if we're a culture without water, then we're missing something.
Water is life to the native people.
It's a living thing, and we want to make sure it stays healthy so we can stay healthy ourselves.
The poster child for water pollution and the need for anti-pollution laws was probably the Cuyahoga River in Ohio, that was so polluted that it would literally catch fire. And this caught the national attention like almost no other pollution source or event. The Environmental Protection Agency was created in 1970, and soon after that, Congress got very busy developing anti-pollution laws. The Clean Water Act initially was an anti-pollution law. There were pollutants being dumped into waters, and Congress set it up that not only should the federal government have some interest in what was being put into these rivers, but it should also regulate and enforce against polluters that weren't meeting basic protections for waters. The Clean Water Act, developed by Congress in 1972, was silent about tribal governments and how they would fit into the Clean Water Act legislation.
The Clean Water Act sets forth plain language goals for all U.S. waters to be fishable and swimmable. Failing to address waters in Indian country essentially created millions of acres of black hole where states did not have authority. In 1987, Congress amended the Act to allow for treatment as a state, or TAS for short. TAS allows the EPA to delegate responsibility to tribes for managing water quality on reservations, similar to the authority delegated to states.
In essence, the tribes are acting as an agent of the federal government. That means they have our back. If we have to go to the mat with someone over water quality standards, the federal government, number one, is our trustee. They're supposed to be there for us anyway, but they've also have put their name on our application and said, we are good with this. One of the important considerations for a tribe is always going to be our designated uses as tribal people encompass other things besides just drinking, stock water, industry, and domestic and all of those kinds of things. There's a really important component that's a cultural use, and a lot of those are considered religious practices.
We felt that it was the tribe's responsibility to regulate, monitor and protect the water quality on the reservation. Nobody had the authority to actually do it. The federal government probably did, but they didn't. So there was a real need out there to step in and make sure that nothing was being polluted right now and to prevent it from being polluted in the future. And that, of course, was the tribe's responsibility.
There are currently 562 federally recognized tribes in the United States, with a combined population of approximately 2 million people, and there are more than 300 Indian reservations. 7 of these reservations are in the state of Montana. Montana is split by 2 continental divides, which send water east, west, and north out of the state to different oceans. Water from the Flathead Reservation flows through the Columbia River Basin to the Pacific Ocean. Water from a portion of the Blackfeet Reservation flows through the Saskatchewan River Basin to the Hudson Bay. And water from the Blackfeet, Rocky Boys, Fort Belknap, Fort Peck, Crow, and Northern Cheyenne reservations flows through the Mississippi Basin to the Gulf of Mexico. The Clean Water Act provides the legal and funding support for managing water quality across the United States, including reservations. we will look at 4 key sections of the Act, which support the study and management of water quality. Section 303 deals with listing impaired water bodies and water quality standards. Section 402 deals with controlling point sources of pollution. Section 319 deals with non-point source pollution. And Section 106 deals with water monitoring.
The 106 program is our water quality monitoring arm of the entire water quality program.
It allows states and tribes to really keep an eye on the quality of water through monitoring programs, through assessment.
The first step in any water monitoring program is to say, okay, well, how clean do you want your water? You have to start with how clean is it right now?
In Montana, all 7 tribal governments currently have TAS authority for the 106 grant program.
Our program started in 1994. We monitor both main watersheds on the reservation here in 1 month, and then we start over again the next month.
In 1989, we developed an application for treatment as a state for Section 106.
Right now we're working in a rotating watershed basin approach, which means every year we go to a different watershed. So every 10 years we'll hit that watershed, and we can look at data from past to the present and see what's different.
It's always data collection. It can be and there can be years where they take time off from data collection and work more closely on data assessment. If data is collected under these EPA grants, our policy is that it is public information. That data does need to be provided to EPA. We have a database called Water Quality Exchange that the tribes need to put the data into, and we assist them in that.
Water quality management data, once we get it back from our lab, we put it into our data management system, and we do the quality assurance and quality control on that data. After we do that, we then submit the data to the EPA on what's called the WQX, or Water Quality Exchange Network.
A tribe that seeks TAS can get some dollars to hire tribal staff under their tribal government to get training to do that program.
There is a lot of training available for both administrative and technical, and I've been through several of those to be able to run a 106 program. Those kind of skills really help out. So once you get into your field season and have to get out and actually get in the water, then you're more apt to be successful.
In any water monitoring program, it is important to ensure that the data you are collecting is good enough to meet your needs. Collecting quality data means using meters and collecting samples correctly, delivering samples to the lab in a timely manner without them being damaged, running duplicate and blank samples to ensure that your methods are working, and finally getting the data into the database without errors. Writing quality assurance documents is an important step in this process and is required for EPA water program funding.
The importance of having quality data is for the purpose of jurisdiction. If there's a water that is totally tribal, then we don't have much problem. But if there's a shared water, then you need to have the right documents to do that. Our tribal government, especially our representatives or tribal council are involved, we do inform them of any major changes.
In order to run a successful division concerning environmental protection programs, you need to have invested people working for the tribe, working for the betterment of the environment.
Local staff right there who know the reservation, who maybe have lived there or who have an invested stake in what the water quality is and the protection of those waters is very valuable.
You have to have the passion and be invested in what you're doing, and typically all my employees are tribal members or tribal descendants and have not ever really known any other home but the reservation. So when you get good people like that that have gone on to college, got their bachelor's degrees and sometimes advanced master's degrees, and they want to come home and help protect the environment, they're invested here. They're not going anywhere. And they know that, I know that, and they love what they do and where they live, and they're going to protect their little piece of the environment as best they can.
The water quality data collected under Section 106 makes it possible to identify water bodies that are impaired by pollution. Section 303 of the Clean Water Act allows for the listing of impaired water bodies and then for setting water quality standards. Just as tribes can apply for TAS under Section 106 of the Clean Water Act, they can also apply for TAS under Section 303.
Currently, there are a couple of tribal governments in Montana that do have Section 303C authority from EPA. The Fort Peck, Assiniboine, and Sioux tribes, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes of the Flathead Reservation, and the Northern Cheyenne Tribe.
We did receive treatment as a state. We did get a draft ordinances in place, and we started developing our standards based on what the state had already done as far as standards for the state. Their standards didn't really apply on the reservation, but they had developed some. So we took those, applied them reservation-wide based on their science, and since then we've done a lot of refinement to that.
What the standards do is they're composed of several things. There's narrative criteria. It's words that describe the appearance of water. It can't have an oily sheen. It can't smell bad. Some narrative description of how the water is envisioned to be. And then it also would have numeric criteria. The temperature can't change only this many degrees in this amount of time, or pH has to be between this range and that range. So both narrative and numeric criteria, and also a component called an anti-degradation policy. And this anti-degradation policy says that if your existing water is this clean, but the uses that you've designated for that water only require that it be this clean, you can't allow it to degrade down to just support existing uses.
Our water quality standards hold true within the exterior boundaries of the reservation, not the state of Montana water quality standards. And that really allowed us to take ownership and control essentially the destiny of the water quality on the reservation.
EPA views a tribe coming in to seek authority for the Section 303 of the Clean Water Act as a real partnership with EPA. We really want to work with a tribe who's interested in coming in for this authority, so we can help them in building the capacity part, which is developing tribal water quality standards. And then on the other side, the legal request, which is the TAS part. So we really encourage tribes to let us know if they're interested in pursuing this.
What we've chosen to do then is, again, work cooperatively with the state and say, we share an interest in protecting the high quality of Flathead Lake. Can we please work together to do that? And that's the approach we've taken.
And the Clean Water Act was developed, I think, because we had a lot of industry and a lot of entities throughout the country directly discharging pollutants and wastewater into waters of the U.S. We still do have direct discharges into waters of the U.S., but at least now we have limits on what can be discharged. States have been delegated programs, and EPA is working in Indian country to permit discharges and oversee permit guidelines and enforce that.
Point sources of pollution include discharge from activities such as industrial processes, large confined animal feeding operations, and municipal wastewater treatment plants, including sewage lagoons.
The lagoons were built in about 1960, the current ones. And the town of Crow Agency, it was just what you see down here, the small part of town. None of the extended housing was in there. Then HUD came along and they built several hundred houses here, and they didn't address the infrastructure portion of it. The lagoon they did nothing on. If you look at the lagoon, you can see some aerators that were placed there, and sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. Because the volume is so great, they're probably not getting the proper treatment on it. The Apsáalooke Water and Wastewater Authority was created by the tribal government, in order for us to replace a failing system. We've been on this project for at least 10 years. The past 7 years have been mainly concentrated on acquiring the money to do it. Even as discouraging as it has been, we've stuck to it because we want to see it through. And we're getting there.
If a person is a point source discharger, they have a discrete conveyance, a pipe or a ditch that discharges to a stream and causes a water quality problem, that can be dealt with in a regulatory fashion because that's under a permit system. But livestock, agriculture, timber, certain other kinds of activities that create these sort of diffuse sources of pollution are all fall under a voluntary framework.
If it's coming out of a pipe, we think of that as a direct discharge. If it's not, it's probably what we call diffuse or non-point source pollution.
Diffuse or non-point sources of pollution are spread out over the landscape and include things like runoff from roads, timber harvesting activities, grazing, bank erosion, and application of fertilizer and pesticides. These types of pollutions are not regulated the same way point sources are and must be dealt with on a voluntary basis.
The 319 grant program is also a program that requires the treatment similar to a state, so tribes do need to apply for that. And currently, all 7 tribal governments in Montana do have that authority and are receiving non-point source grant funds.
Most of the water quality problems that we have to deal with on a voluntary basis. We have to seek landowner cooperation.
So we work with landowners throughout the reservation on different projects and found them to be very successful to help these farmers and ranchers maybe put their cows in one location, get them some water, and start fencing off the riparian areas to allow them to grow back in its natural habitat.
Today we were working with Jennifer Winterstein on doing habitat assessments. We wrote a grant, and this grant is going to help us buy equipment to fence off the river here and put in wells so the horses don't have to come down to the river and drink, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to cut down on the E. coli counts. Also, we're trying to cut down on nutrients from the manure. Today we're doing a habitat assessment, and we're looking at refugia for fish and bank conditions.
The non-point source program is great in that there's money to help do some kind of protection or some kind of restoration, and money to help monitor that implementation activity.
What we're going to do is we're going to fence this area off, take out all the corrals, fence it off to where the horses can't come to the river, and we're going to reseed the area, put a buffer zone here so when it rains we don't get runoff from the manure into the river.
Before and after the implementation activity has taken place, there's monitoring that needs to occur to support the reasons for the restoration, and then to see if that was successful and if it's being protected adequately or it's restored to a level where the Clean Water Act goals can be fulfilled, fishable and swimmable goals.
We have a site where we test upstream, and we have another site that we test downstream. We're testing for E. coli and the nitrates. The landowner has been very cooperative, and he's been willing to let us be here and test here. We come back every year and do testing like habitat and just make sure that he's keeping it up, the plan that we've put here.
Community education is a great part of the 319 water program in that this is not a regulatory program, this is a cooperative program. And so we're looking for people to cooperate, and community outreach and education is a huge part, and we do encourage grantees to have a component in their grants with EPA on outreach and education for this program.
Well, we're going to work on establishing all the landowners to work with us, and the project is an opening to all other landowners too. You know, they see that he's doing this, you know, so they'd want to do it too. Our goal is to produce more projects like this along the Little Bighorn. We're working on outreach where we go and we hand out brochures or put on PowerPoints to the community.
We can't go out to a non-member or even a tribal member farmer who is causing a water quality problem that would be classified as a non-point source problem and do anything like fine them or take them to jail or any of those kinds of things. All that we could do is we could try to sit down and educate them and say, this is what you're doing, this is what it causes, this is what we would like you to do, and in some cases we have money to help you do this. We work to educate the public about water quality issues, and I think that that's probably one of the most important accomplishments that we've had in terms of just getting people to think about water quality and the fact that their actions could negatively affect water quality.
Well, in working with the college, local college, we've done that several times, and with programs that they developed for students as interns. And that seemed to work very well. You know, if a student is fairly committed and willing to do that type of work, and we're certainly open to that.
Where I am now at Salish Kootenai College, I think that's the kind of role that we can play, is in number one, educating a cadre of young people to these issues. And if we have a water quality class, for example, that we talk with them about the treatment as a state process, and we talk about the histories that some of these tribes have gone through, and we give them that working practical knowledge, and that when we then arm them with that, they can go out and work with the public and have that knowledge to share with people too.
EPA has developed some guidance as far as grant guidance and other documents that help meet a tribal government or even a state government where they are, as far as what are their priorities, what are their concerns, what pollution sources do they have, and they can tailor their program to address those issues.
There are probably a lot of tribes that are out there thinking about pursuing treatment as a state, and I think that the important advice that I would share with them would be to know the procedures, to know the requirements, and follow the process. And I also think that what would be important about that is, most important from my standpoint, looking back on our experiences, would be to do the best, to invest as much as they could in public education. And as I've said repeatedly, to educate the public about what you are about as well as what you are not about. Telling people about what you do is at least as important as what you actually do in your job.
You take responsibility for what is under your domain to protect during your time on this earth.
We still have some fairly serious problems, but I think what we've been able to do is when we've been able to reverse the trend in some areas, and most importantly, we've been able to maintain the existing high quality that we do enjoy with a lot of the streams and rivers that we have on the reservations. And I think it's one of the things that's helped make the tribes here as successful as they have been, is recognition of the resources that we have and then a commitment to stewardship of those resources. But we did have to take that stance of once that water enters the reservation, we have to be the single management entity. And we've had to prove ourselves. We've really had to prove ourselves capable of doing that, and I think we have.
We have a lot of resources out there that we want to protect, and we didn't want anybody else coming in telling us how to protect those.
Cultural perceptions of the water have been the driving force, I believe, for water quality. Anything we do with water is because it is sacred to us.
Water is very important for everyone, and especially here in the Cheyenne culture, it's held in a sacred way. You know, I try to balance that out with the scientific part of it, but culture is also important.
It's basically the lifeblood of the people here.
Water is considered the sacred lifeblood of many native cultures, a concept that is passed down through oral tradition and stories.
There's a story of two boys that were taken from their mother's womb. This is an old Crow story. Their mother was killed while she was pregnant with them. An evil woman killed her, and she took the two children out of the womb while they were still babies, and she tried to get rid of them. She threw one over there in the water, and she threw the other one behind the teepee lining, and she left. And the father came back from off all day hunting, and when he came back to his home, he found that his wife had been killed, and that one of the babies was thrown behind the liner, the teepee. And so he discovered that baby, and he was so thankful that he had this baby still. He raised it up. It took many years before the father discovered that his boy was actually an animal living in the water. But when he found out, he devised a plan, and with his other son, they captured him, they tied him up, and they brought him into the sweat lodge. And they poured water on the rocks, the same water that boy had grown up in, and turned him into a water animal. They poured that same water on the rocks, and with the prayers and the steam, they were able to heal this animal and turn him back into a human being again. This water that all of us have inside of our blood, you know, it's come from the heavens, it's gone down these rivers from the mountains all the way to the ocean, back up around again, and it's through us again. You know, the same water that's in us was in our great-great-grandfathers, great-great-great-grandmothers. And so this is part of the reason why we're human beings. And this is part of our charge as Indian people, is to recognize this simple, profound fact that we are nothing more than water, and that we need to protect ourselves and we need to protect our water sources.
river.